With the return of Tom Welling as Clark Kent in the upcoming Arrowverse's Crisis on Infinite Earth storyline, I'm sure some people are thinking, I never watched Smallville, and now I finally have the excuse I need to give it a watch. But 10 seasons seems like a lot. Or maybe some people might think, I'd like to rewatch Smallville again, just not all of it. And for those people, I happen to have a skippable episodes guide for Smallville. In this guide, I try to follow the main storyline. And sometimes that means you get bad episodes, because it's part of the main plot.
Nobody has sacrificed as much as I have for these stones.
They don't belong to you.
And I admit to throwing in a couple of my favorites because...
What can I say except you're welcome?
Before we begin, let me preface this guide by saying I know a lot of people hate the concept of skipping episodes and must watch every episode in its entirety like it's gospel. And for those people, I'm sorry. I did not make this guide for you. I am also not suggesting that this is the way to watch the series or any series. I only make guides like this because friends or internet randoms ask me to. So if someone wants to watch Smallville this way, I got you. Also, I'll put the episode breakdown in the description if you just want to grab the list and go. In some ways, I enjoy Season 1 the most. Even if there's a Monster of the Week structure to the first season, there's a kind of beautiful simplicity in the idea that in each episode, trouble is going to show up and Clark is going to save the day. Unfortunately, the formulaic aspect of Season 1 means you don't really have to watch most of it. And by skipping the bulk of the season, you're going to miss the back and forth and growth of character relationships. But if you're in this for 10 seasons, that's all going to change anyway, so what's the point? I'd also like to mention that if you stick to a pure main storyline, you don't need to watch episode 16, Stray. But I can't help myself. It represents the tone and spirit of the first season and is, in my opinion, the best of what Season 1 has to offer. So you're welcome. Season 2 builds on the ideas that were set up in Season 1, while introducing a lot of drama that really only lasts for this season. It's actually a little crazy how much you can skip in Smallville and have it reasonably work. There's an episode where this guy gets hospitalized for interacting with a plot device, and then we don't come back to that guy for 5 more episodes, which are filled with more or less self-contained stories. It's because of this that I don't feel it's necessary to include episodes that explain every subplot. The nature of a list like this implies you're trying to save time, so I'm fairly generous with my episode cuts. But doing it this way, sometimes things aren't going to make sense. Someone starts a job this season and you'll wonder, did this person always have this job? Someone else is suddenly pregnant this season out of nowhere. Another character's living situation changes with no explanation. Another character will miraculously heal from something that ailed them for several episodes. And another character gets engaged to someone you haven't met at all. In my defense, that's a relationship that went from introduction to courtship to marriage proposal in 5 episodes. I will try and give you a heads up on some of these things in the breakdown for each season, but you're going to have to trust me and roll with it. We're trying to draw a comprehensive line through 10 seasons of a show that was more or less planned 1 season at a time. Cutting episodes out of a season is messy and imperfect. But if you want a shortcut through these woods, take my hand and ask me questions you have in the comments below. By this point in the series, you're going to realize that this show is mostly about investigations. Ooh, what's this? Or, hey, what's that? And then some variation of our heroes solve the mystery, sometimes while there's a B-plot, like Jonathan and Martha having marital troubles because Jonathan is doing something stubborn and Martha isn't going to stand for it this time.
Jonathan, please be careful!
So a lot of episodes I'm skipping this season are about investigations that don't really push forward the main story. And Season 3 actually works in a way that you can break it into 2 different skippable guides. If you use the longer episode list, I include Episode 8 Shattered and Episode 9 Asylum that go over the Lex-Lionel dynamic. I also include Episode 20 Talisman, which is a continuation of a Season 2 theme, but since it's debatable how crucial that theme is to the series, and the episode is fairly self-contained, I'll let you decide whether or not to include it based on how much time you actually want to dedicate to the season. Personally, I'd skip it. In fact, none of the extra episodes I include are particularly great, but they will make the season and some characters more comprehensive. Especially this guy. Yeah, this guy. If you use the longer episode list, this guy will have a basic introduction. If you don't, he will show up out of nowhere. They use this guy as a way to make some characters jealous and to move the plot forward for some other characters. He seems important to the plot, but he's not. Also, if you're really pressed for time, you don't need to watch episode 14, Obsession, but the character in it, Alicia, might be one of the best parts about the show. Of all the Clark and Smallville seasons, this one might be the best.
What'd I do?
You trusted me.
It has heart, it's fun,
Did you crack open the cooking sherry?
Of course not. I'm just super pumped about prom.
it doesn't always take itself very seriously,
Did you pin that on me?
I'll explain later, Lois.
A little close to the boob, don't you think?
and it has 2 Alicia episodes. 2! And yes, I did put them both in there. And no, you don't need to watch them both, but you're gonna. In this season, I skip an episode where some characters get transformed into witches, and I think of all the episodes I skip, this is probably the episode I feel best about skipping.
I need a lock of your hair for a scrapbook I'm making for Chloe's birthday.
You really don't need to see that one. But unfortunately, someone on the production team thought the witch thing was cool and it comes back up throughout the season. Which is why when you watch episode 15, Sacred, you'll ask, why is this character a witch now? I mean, there's some lead up to it, but it's still going to be quite confusing. I would skip episode 15, Sacred, entirely, but there are some items in there that are pretty important. It's too bad I'm not making a best episodes guide, because I would gladly trade episode 18, Spirit, or episode 19, Blank, over this confusing witch episode, because both 18 and 19 are fun and touching and wonderful. But they don't advance the plot. If you're in a rush, I think you could skip Transference and episode 17, Onyx. It really all depends on how important the Luthers are to you. These episodes further your understanding of their characters, but if you aren't interested, I would skip them. Also in this season, Jensen Ackles from Supernatural is on the show. And if you've ever watched Supernatural, it is extremely difficult to watch him be so pathetic.
Carry on my wayward son. There'll be peace when you are done. Lay your weary head to rest. Don't you cry no more.
Season 5 is about change. A lot of relationships get shifted around, and some dynamics change forever. But Smallville being Smallville, relationships can't just change because two people decide they aren't right for each other. Relationships change because of some complex, often Kryptonian melodrama.
How'd you know about the red kryptonite?
Because I know everything about you, Clark. We were meant to be together, remember? Just like you said.
You drugged me.
I included a couple of more episodes in here than I'd like, simply because they introduce characters that we will see later in the series. But despite some melodramatic turns, Season 5 makes some of the biggest emotional swings in the series, and often hits them out of the park. There was also a huge 5-episode jump that I make this season, which will probably create the most jarring moment, where there will be suddenly a new, unexpected relationship. Then there will be a couple of smaller oddities, like changes in careers. I also skipped an episode about a group of vampires who are led by a girl named Buffy. Again.
What can I say except you're welcome?
Season 6 is pretty dark at times. Like, apocalypse dark. Like, I murdered somebody and someone else helped me cover it up, and now we both have to keep the secret dark. I think Smallville works best when it's light and fun. Which might make you wonder, why so few episodes cut this season? Well, one of the main storylines is that some bad guys show up, and so I tried to include the episodes that dealt with them. I think you could probably get away with skipping these episodes. So if you want to do that, skip episodes 6, 8, and 17. You really only shorten a couple of the main plot lines by doing this. I also feel like there's a trend in this guide where I skip an engagement, a marriage, and the courtships for a couple of other relationships. Smallville kind of has some rocky bits in the following seasons.
Rye whiskey. Rocks.
There are some good aspects of Season 7, but there's also quite a bit of Season 6 onward. Like a mental hospital episode where they try to convince Clark that his whole reality on the show we've been watching so far was all in his head. And it doesn't even have a cool ending like that episode from Buffy where they did the same thing.
I'm afraid we lost her.
Not cool, Smallville. Season 7 feels like a transition season. Clark is growing up, and so is the show. That's probably the biggest theme of the season, which makes it hard to pick episodes that show the main story, because there isn't really one. So I try to include some of the big moments. There is a section where I skip 8 consecutive episodes, which might be the longest I've gone in any season. And if a character on Smallville can go from introduction to courtship to marriage in 5 episodes, imagine all you could miss in those 8 episodes. The major things are a character returning suddenly, a couple of people will suddenly be in a relationship, and there's this foundation that will suddenly show up. I don't think it's a spoiler to tell you what it's about, and I think it will help because I completely skip its inception. It's called the ISIS Foundation, and according to the Smallville Wiki, it's a non-profit organization to provide outreach and support to the meteor infected. There's also going to be a villain that will suddenly appear. You'll get the impression that they played a larger role in the season, and you're right, they did. So that's going to be a little confusing. But this villain comes and goes a lot, so get used to it. There's also a new character this season that's kind of fun, and if you're looking to throw a fun episode in the mix, I would recommend Episode 3, Fierce. It has a Miss Sweetcorn competition. What could be more wholesome than that? Smallville Season 8 marks the departure of executive producers and writers Miles Miller and Alfred Goff, who stopped working on the show in Season 7. Miller and Goff developed the show, and it was their baby in a way, and with their departure, it's almost like the show mourns them. Season 8 is as dark as it gets. There's some drug addiction, characters losing their way, and marriage troubles, but thankfully I skip all that. And of course, I skip another wedding. Skipping episodes in this season might actually be the most straightforward. Some characters will advance a little to places you don't expect, but for the most part, it should all be pretty easy to digest. Life gets more complicated the older you get. Season 9 kinda makes you miss the Season 1 days of Meteor Freak after Meteor Freak and Clark saving the day. Now we have some Kandorians and government organizations and some mysterious characters manipulating everyone.
Sam, I am so very, 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 very tired.
But still, I try to make the season a little lighter. I put it in an episode because it was fun and there was a kiss in it. Don't worry, it's an important kiss. It's a tricky season to whittle down and have everything make sense. This organization, Checkmate, is going to show up, and I don't know if they explain what it is, so I'm just going to have to tell you. It's a government organization trying to control all superpowered people. There's also going to be an episode where someone says,
"Welcome to the Suicide Squad."
And then I remove the 2 episodes with them so you never even see it. One last thing to note, there's a 2-part episode in this season called Absolute Justice. It should show up wherever you're watching as a 2-part episode, but just in case it doesn't, the second episode is called Society. Season 10 is easier than previous seasons to break down into its compartmentalized themes. So in this season, I try to give you a little bit of each of them. I actually think this one is pretty smooth. The most jarring thing I do is there's an episode where a bunch of characters wind up unconscious in a way that suggests there will be a resolution in the next episode, and then I skip that next episode. But don't sweat it, they're fine. Season 10 is really about working towards those last 2 episodes and those final moments, and it doesn't disappoint. Superman is more than a show or a comic or a character. He is an ideal. He is a perpetual light we can look to when we need it. He is in the pages of Action Comics. He is in the radio introduction of Jackson Beck.
Up in the sky, it's a bird, it's a plane, it's Superman!
He is in George Reeves' authoritative voice.
Don't be afraid. No one's going to hurt you.
He is in the curl in Christopher Reeve's hair. He is in the trumpets of John Williams' immortal theme. And the swelling triumph in Hans Zimmer's. he is in the hopeful eyes of Tom Welling. And for the final moments of Smallville, it reaches the heights of that tradition and makes us proud.